Because these are overall rankings, it's critical that you know that this is for a 12 team, start one quarterback, two running backs, two receivers, one tight end, one flex, half PPR format with a relatively shallow bench. Now, the adjustments that you'd be making based off scoring, if you are going to be playing in a full PPR format, you're going to be moving up wide receivers, you're going to be moving down quarterbacks. If you are playing in a non-PPR league, you'd be moving down the receivers and you'd be moving up the quarterbacks and running backs. If you add a wide receiver slot, so you're starting 3 instead of 2, you're going to be moving up wide receivers and down quarterback and tight ends. And if you're moving into a league with 2 flex spots rather than 1, you're going to be moving the quarterback and tight end positions down, and you're going to be moving the wide receiver and running back positions up. So I hope that explains everything. Let's dive into tier 1, McCaffrey, Lamb, Tyreek. Now, if we're looking at McCaffrey, he was previously the easy 101. Now, we just got news that McCaffrey, dealing with the sprained calf, is not playing this preseason. And I immediately hear that and go, oh crap. He's a 28-year-old running back coming off a season where he just had nearly 400 touch. Insane workload. We know age 28 is typically an age cliff for these guys. So I want to say there's too much risk. You can't take CMC at 1. But I'll tell you one thing, if I get in the Flock League in, I want to say the draft's 14 days from now, and all of a sudden I get picked 1, I'm taking McCaffrey because he has a ceiling that nobody else can match. He averaged 120 total yards per game last year. Even if he declines by 10%, even if he's only 90% of the running back that he was last season, he is still clearly the number 1 overall player in fantasy. For that reason, I think we're going to take him. Like I said, if you're playing in a league where you start 3 wide receivers and it's a full PPR format, there I wouldn't fault you at all for going Lamb or Tyreek. Lamb and Tyreek, there's not too much to discuss. Both guys were elite last year. Tyreek was a little better, but I'm going to give the slight edge to CeeDee Lamb going into his age 25 season in comparison to Tyreek going into his age 30 year. Now, dropping down to our next tier, I'm going to have Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson at 4 and 5. Now, I've talked about this all offseason, but the reason I'm taking Breece over Bijan is while both running backs have much better situations this year than the year before, Breece Hall has already demonstrated a ceiling that Bijan has not come close to at the NFL level. While yes, Breece and Bijan both get the quarterback upgrade, while yes, Breece and Bijan are both in better situations in that the Jets go through and they invest into the offensive line, the Falcons go out there and get rid of Arthur Smith. What you are seeing is you are seeing, in my mind, the edge to Breece be given from the fact that he is another year removed from the torn ACL. So I'm going Breece over Bijan, but nonetheless, in your regular redraft league, if you only start 2 wide receivers, 1 flex, I would go with both these running backs over the other elite receivers. And the other elite receivers are going to be Chase, St. Brown, Jefferson. If you're playing in a full PPR format and you want to move St. Brown over Chase, I'm not going to fault you for it. I just think that Chase has bigger play potential based off what we have seen from him with a healthy Joe Burrow. And if you currently look at sportsbooks with the amount of points they're projecting Cincinnati to put up this season, they are currently projecting Burrow to be healthy. Now, if you're looking at Jefferson, I think most years going into the future will be my 101. It's just very difficult to do so this season when you're going to see Sam Darnold as his quarterback for a stretch of the year. And if it's not Darnold, it's going to be a rookie quarterback that we really don't know what to expect. So while I do believe Jefferson's the most talented wide receiver in the NFL, and I would love to put him at 1 overall, the Vikings offense will be much worse than the Dallas offense, much worse than Miami, much worse than Detroit, much worse than Cincinnati. So I think we're going to have to put Jefferson down at 8. Now, dropping down to our next tier, here it is a little interesting. I think you can kind of go A.J. Brown or Jahmyr Gibbs. If I am looking at Brown, I think he is a pick if you are playing in a league with multiple flex spots or you start 3 wide receivers. In that format where you only start 2 wide receivers, 1 flex, I think you're going to have phenomenal wide receiver values in the middle rounds that are available to you. So I think it makes more sense to go ahead and take Gibbs. If you are looking at Jahmyr Gibbs, everything comes down to, does he have the red zone role or does David Montgomery have the red zone role? At the beginning of last season, it was Montgomery, but then at the end of the year, they were splitting it 50-50. I'm going to make the bet that the 22-year-old running back that was just selected at 12 overall continues to expand his role there. Right now, the Lions are projected to score the 2nd most points in the NFL this season, according to sportsbooks. And this is a running back that should have absolutely everything as a pass catcher. A.J. Brown at 10. Then we're going to go Garrett Wilson at 11. With Wilson, it's just a spot in which it's so easy to project the efficiency of this offense to go through the roof. Where, I mean, Wilson has dealt with some of the worst quarterback play the NFL has seen over the past decade with Zach Wilson. If you're looking at Rodgers, I'm a little concerned that he's not playing in the preseason. But ultimately, I don't think it matters. Sportsbooks are still projecting the Jets to be a slightly above offense this next year. And if you're going from the worst to slightly above, and Garrett Wilson's already demonstrated that he is going to have an insane target share here, I'm fine ranking him at the 1-2 turn. And then our last two guys in this tier will be Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley. I think Taylor and Barkley belong next to each other, given the fact that these are two players that are very similar profiles. I believe that both players have elite talent profiles. They're both playing alongside quarterbacks that are going to be running the ball a ton in Anthony Richardson and Jalen Hurts, both of whom have the size to actually steal rushing touchdowns at the goal line. And we assume because they are those rushing quarterbacks, we are going to have a lower check down rate both to Taylor and Barkley. In my mind, Taylor's the younger running back. Barkley's also someone that lives a little bit more based off his receiving volume. And for that reason, I'm going to be going with Taylor over Barkley, but I think both guys are solid options at the 1-2 turn. And then actually in this tier, we are going to include Puka Nacua. Puka used to be higher than this, but I don't know. For him to deal with the knee sprain right now going into the season and with Cooper Kupp looking healthy, I do think that I want a little bit of a discount if I'm going to go ahead and draft Puka, which is frustrating because y'all know I've done, over 100 underdog drafts at this point on the live stream. And through the entire offseason, I was taking Puka over Garrett Wilson. I wish I could go back and flip that just because of the Puka knee injury. And yeah, I've actually seen in underdog drafts as of late, Puka sliding to the middle of the second round or the late second round. So you may not even have to take him this high. Now, I will on underdog because wide receivers are so hard to come by. But of course, if you wanted to hop in one of those underdog drafts with us, we're doing it every single night on the live stream. Underdog's actually dropping flock tournaments every Monday and Thursday until the season starts. But of course, if you want to join a flock tournament with us on Underdog or just a regular draft any given night, you can find that link in the description, in the comment section. If you use code FLOCK, you're going to be getting my 2024 Fantasy Football Draft Guide, my 2024 Fantasy Football Rankings, a 50% deposit bonus up to $250, an exclusive Christian McCaffrey special pick'em, more than less than half a total yard against the Jets week 1. And their best ball drafts, so there's no time commitment during the year. It's how I draft hundreds of teams every offseason. It's how I won $150,000 on Underdog 2 years ago. But let's go into our next tier. We're going to look at Drake London here at 15. Drake London is very similar to Garrett Wilson. Drake London has never been good for fantasy football purposes, but if you look at the advanced analytics, it's pretty safe to say that he has the talent profile that we want to be chasing. And if you look at Drake London, he has a massive upgraded quarterback. The reason I'm going to go Wilson over London is just given the fact that Drake London does have to compete for targets with Kyle Pitts, whereas Garrett Wilson doesn't really have anybody like that in his offense. Now, Marvin Harrison Jr. will be our next guy at 16. I have a conspiracy theory. I don't even know if I want to go into my conspiracy theory here. It's going to waste too much of your time. But with Harrison, the best wide receiver prospect that we've seen come into the NFL in a very, very long time. And typically these guys that go at the top of the NFL draft because they are special players, they get stuck with garbage quarterbacks because for a team to be at the top of the draft and get a wide receiver prospect that's as good as Harrison, typically they have to have a very bad quarterback to get that early pick. AKA, go look at Malik Neighbors and Daniel Jones. We'll talk about him later on. But surprisingly enough, Harrison gets average to above average quarterback play with Kyler Murray. And at the same time, there's no target competition outside of Trey McBride in this offense. So I think Harrison is in a very special spot for a rookie wide receiver. Kyren Williams will be our next guy at 17. With Kyren, I've actually drafted him nonstop on Underdog in round 3. And your regular redraft league, I'd be willing to take him in round 2, though. Obviously, there is some ambiguity here with Blake Corum and what the roles are going to look like for both running backs. I sadly was not smart enough to draft Kyren Williams at dirt cheap prices last year. Trust me, I wish that I was. Sadly, I wasn't. But what we can say is the running back that's going into his age 24 season, that's coming off a monstrous year. Even if he regresses just slightly, he can return value in the middle of the second. Now, we're going to go through a laundry list of wide receivers. Debo, Olave, Nico, Waddle, Devontae Adams. Debo Samuel, I'm going to be ranking here with the uncertainty of the Brandon Ayuk trade. I'm recording this August 6th, late at night, and we have no news of Ayuk yet. If Ayuk does get dealt, I think you can move Debo Samuel ahead of Harrison and ahead of London to the very top of this tier. If Ayuk is never traded, I think you can move Debo maybe a few spots down. But right now, it looks like Ayuk's going to get dealt. We just don't know if another wide receiver is going to be going back to San Francisco. Of course, I'll keep you updated with an updated draft guide and updated rankings every single Sunday till the start of the season. If you use code FLOCK on Underdog or you're a member of flockfantasy.com. Chris Olave at 19, I think that we can throw him in the same bucket as Drake London and Garrett Wilson in that he has proved he is a top talent at the wide receiver position. The issue is he's not like London or Wilson in that he doesn't get a quarterback upgrade. He's been held back because Derek Carr has been the check down princess, doing him no favors. And Derek Carr is still the quarterback there this next year. So Nico Collins, Jalen Waddle will be our next guys here at 2021. They have a serious amount of target competition at wide receiver, but at the end of the day, they should be in offenses that are top 5 in the NFL in both passing yards and passing touchdowns. And they are proven to be highly efficient players based off their yards per route run and what we saw this last year. Devontae Adams in this tier should have the highest target share out of any of these wide receivers. And also, obviously is a better track record than anybody else above him in this tier. But at the same time, he'll be in a worse offense than Atlanta. He'll be in a worse offense than Arizona. He'll be in a worse offense than the Niners. He'll be in the worst offense out of this entire group. And he's declined for 3 straight seasons and sees a little bit of added target competition in the form of Brock Bowers. And then Achan's going to be really like the only other running back that we mix in. With Achan, he was the most efficient running back in the NFL last year from a yards per touch perspective. And if he were to maintain that efficiency going into this next season, if he were to do that for the rest of his career, he will go down as the best running back in NFL history. Now, is that going to happen? No, of course not. The efficiency is going to come down dramatically. The yards per touch, the yards per carry, there's no way it can stay that high. What you want to see from Achan is you want to see the volume go up. The efficiency can come down if the volume goes up. Typically with the rookie profile like that, I would assume that's what's going to happen. My hesitation and why we can't rank Achan as a round 1 pick is his size may limit his ability to see a massive bump in volume. Now, dropping down to our next tier, this is where I think you begin to mix in the elite quarterbacks and the elite tight end. We're going to go Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, and Sam Laporta. With Josh Allen, you no longer have Stephon Diggs. You no longer have Gabe Davis. But you add in Keon Coleman, you add in Curtis Samuel. Hopefully Shakir takes a step forward. Hopefully Dalton Kincaid gets better going into year 2. Josh Allen has 4 years straight in fantasy, scoring over 390 fantasy points. Obnoxious. He can have 16 rushing touchdowns this year and potentially lead the NFL in pass attempts. I don't care about his situation getting worse. I am all in on Allen as QB1. I've drafted a ridiculous amount of him. Jalen Hurts at 25, you're hoping the changing coaching staff ends up benefiting Hurts for the positive. Play calling down the stretch last year did not look good. And hopefully Jalen Hurts was dealing with the nagging injury, and that's why we saw the fall off at the end of last year. I know some people are going to be concerned about the loss of Jason Kelce and the addition of Barkley, and if this means you have less rushing touchdowns for Jalen Hurts with the push-tush. Now, looking at Sam Laporta at 26, I understand a lot of other people want to have Kelce tight end 1. My thing is right now, Detroit projects to score the second most points in the NFL this season. And with Sam Laporta, he was the best rookie tight end of all time last year. While yes, it looks like on the surface that he may see some touchdown regression, at the same time, the departure of Josh Reynolds may open up more red zone opportunities, and you have no super solid wide receiver 3, and Jamison Williams is not a red zone weapon. So I'm all in on Laporta, where I wish I was last year, trust me. Our next 2 guys will be Pacheco and Etienne. Pacheco looks like he may have third down usage now. With the departure of McKinnon, it looks like just the entire backfield is his. I know you have Prince. I know you have Clyde Edwards-Helaire competing for the RB2 job. Honestly, RB2 here probably doesn't matter. Travis Etienne was a mid-running back 1 last year. His situation really hasn't changed. I think the Jags could potentially get better this next season. So he seems like a super safe play. Travis Kelce at 29 is going to be really old. You add in Hollywood Brown. You add in Xavier Worthy. Rashee Rice going into year 2. Still in on Kelce, especially in a league where you're going to start 2 wide receivers, 1 flex. In that kind of format, I really want an elite tight end. I really want an elite quarterback. If you were playing in that format, however, where you start like 3 wide receivers and 2 flex spots, there, as I already mentioned, you're going to be moving down the quarterbacks and tight ends. And then we're going to go Lamar Jackson at 30. Looking at our 2024 ADP consensus cheat sheet, it actually looks like you may have the opportunity in some platforms to go with Lamar in round 3, Andrews round 4. And in a league where you're going to start 2 wide receivers, 1 flex, that would be beautiful. Now, going over to the last 2 running backs, we're going to go Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry. I know I'm going to get the most crap for Derrick Henry here. I understand it. Yes, I get it. I'm just not drafting the guy. If it was a non-PPR format, of course, you can go through and you can throw him up a little bit higher. Derrick Henry will be in a much better situation this next year than he was last season, which is why I'm ranking Derrick Henry this high. If Derrick Henry repeated what he did last year, averaging 1.6 receptions per game and 68 rushing yards per game, Derrick Henry would be a bust if you took him in round 3, but I'm expecting him to get better, which is an outlier scenario because if you look at running backs that at a similar age 29 season to Derrick Henry since the year 2000, every single one of these guys got worse going into their age 30 year. Whether it was Warwick Dunn, Antonio Smith, Steven Jackson, Frank Gore, Justin Forsett, James Stewart, Rashad Jennings, Edgar and James. Those were all the guys that comp similarly at 29 years old. If you're looking at their rushing yards per game, if you're looking at their receiving yards per game, they all got worse at 30. It's the natural trajectory of these aging running backs. Derrick Henry's gotten worse every year over the past 3 seasons. I'm expecting him to get slightly better this year, which is why I'm ranking him as a round 3 pick, but I simply cannot draft him with where he's going in round 2 of redraft leagues currently, unless it's a non-PPR format. And then, with Jacobs, I think Jacobs catches more balls. I think he has a massive offensive upgrade, just like Derrick Henry does. And Jacobs is much younger at the same time. So you can hate me for it. I get it. I'm wrong all the time. I just personally am not taking Derrick Henry unless I get him at the end of round 3 this year. And then moving down to our next tier, we're going to go Mike Evans, Devonta Smith, Brandon Ayuk back to back to back. Evans and Smith seem like very safe options where you kind of understand what you are going to be getting. I think that they are easy plays if you decided to go with, like, say, Jahmyr Gibbs and Saquon Barkley with your first 2 picks. If you could go Mike Evans, Devonta Smith, or Mike Evans, Devonta Smith, Brandon Ayuk, 2 of those 3 at the 3-4 turn in your draft, I think that makes a ton of sense. Now, of course, I can't talk too much on Ayuk here just because I'm recording this before we officially have the Ayuk trade. So if he goes to New England, RIP. If he goes to Pittsburgh, no bueno. Looking over at tight end, we're going to have Mark Andrews, Trey McBride, 36-37. Most platforms actually have Trey McBride getting drafted ahead of Andrews. Just personally for me, we have a larger sample with Mark Andrews, and I'm a little bit concerned that the addition of Harrison is going to take targets away from McBride this season. I'm a little worried that the McBride volume that you had at the end of last year was primarily due to the fact that you really had nobody there outside of Hollywood Brown, who I personally believe is washed. Speaking of washed receivers, I don't know if they are. They may be. We have Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs back to back. The reports right now are screaming that Cooper Kupp is good to go, that Cooper Kupp is fully healthy, and that actually the guy that you potentially have to be worried about an injury with is Puka Nacua in this offense. Now, with that in mind, I think if you wanted to move up Kupp, you can. Just in my mind, this is a wide receiver that's declined for 3 straight years now from a points per game perspective, going into his age 30 season, playing alongside the wide receiver that just put up the best rookie wide receiver season of all time. So I would have to be a little hesitant. Stephon Diggs here. Obviously, if you look at the splits for the first half of last season versus the second half, when the offensive coordinator changed, everything changed. Stephon Diggs fell off the face of the planet. If you look at the 3-year sample you have with Diggs, though, all the advanced analytics still look decent besides the second half of last year. So I don't know if this was an offensive scheme type issue. He has great quarterback play in CJ Stroud, so I think he could finish a lot higher than this. Going over to Mahomes at 40, y'all know I am quick to draft a lot of Patrick Mahomes. We won the $150,000 2 years ago on Underdog because Mahomes was my most drafted quarterback in round 5. I just simply cannot rank him over Lamar, Allen, Jalen Hurts in a 4-point passing touchdown format. And the reason being is in a 4-point passing touchdown format, the quarterbacks that are going to have elite rushing ceilings, they are going to be highly desirable. Mahomes will run the ball a bit. He doesn't have a quote-unquote elite rushing ceiling, however. So for that reason, I think I would need a discount. I'm fine with going him in round 4, especially if you were able to go Travis Kelce in round 3. If you go Kelce round 3, Mahomes round 4, I think that'd be a phenomenal start. Going James Cook, Rachaad White, 41, 42. These are two running backs that are still on their rookie deals, are still relatively young, had volume last year. You don't really have too many additions to their backfield. You have Ray Davis and Bucky Irving. However, with the volume that they had last season, ultimately, they were a little bit disappointing. So the question that you're going to have to ask is you're going to have to ask yourself, can these running backs see a boost in efficiency this next year? Why I personally have not shied away from drafting these guys. You can get them at the end of the 5th round or even Rachaad White at the end of the 6th round in some underdog drafts, is while they may not have been efficient with their volume in the past, they're at least going to catch the ball, especially Rachaad White. But it just comes down to the price point that you're going to get if you believe that they have a cap ceiling. Now, Dalton Kincaid will be our next guy at 43. I am of the belief that the Buffalo Bills will still be a top offense from a fantasy football perspective this next year. While Dalton Kincaid for sure was not close to Sam Laporta this past season, I think it's an unfair judgment of him for just being alongside the best rookie tight end that the NFL has ever seen. If you look at Kincaid's rookie season on the whole, he was still an incredibly impressive rookie tight end that was drafted round 1 of the draft, where you have a ton of turnover in the wide receiver room in one of the best offenses in the league. So personally, I have found myself drafting a lot of Kincaid. I will reiterate, if you can go Josh Allen round 3, Dalton Kincaid round 4, I would really like that. Some wide receivers here. We're going to have DK Metcalf, DJ Moore, Malik Neighbors. In the case of DK Metcalf, it sounds like currently the Seattle Seahawks are projecting to throw the ball a lot more with this new coaching staff than they did with the previous one. Now, with that being said, DK Metcalf has one season of his NFL career finishing higher than the wide receiver 20 from a points per game perspective. He was drafted back in 2019. So, like I said in the wide receiver rankings video, I know a lot of people see DK Metcalf. He reminds them of me with our frames looking almost identical, thinking that he has a ton of upside from a fantasy football perspective. But honestly, it just kind of hasn't come true. And also, Jackson Smith and Jigba may be better this year. DJ Moore at 45. DJ Moore, obviously, if he repeats what he did last year, he absolutely crushes. And I think Caleb Williams will be a significant upgrade as a passer over what you had with Justin Fields last season. Now, the issue with DJ Moore, of course, is you add in a wide receiver in the top 10 picks of the draft this year in Rome Odunze, and at the same time, you add in Keenan Allen, a wide receiver that historically has kind of been a black hole for targets over the middle of the football field. So you have a better overall passing offense, but significantly more competition. Malik Neighbors at 46. Cannot stop making highlight grabs in training camp. Every other time I open up Twitter, all I see is, oh my gosh, look at what Malik Neighbors just did. Malik Neighbors is going to be something special, yada, 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 yada. I get it, and I agree. I think Malik Neighbors is most likely going to be a great NFL wide receiver. With that being said, he's going into his rookie season. And with that being said, the issue that we've talked about previously in terms of these guys that are top wide receiver prospects historically getting stuck with absolutely garbage quarterback play will be the case for Neighbors with the Giants. I've already showed you all the math with how playing in one of the worst offenses in the NFL will absolutely crush a wide receiver's upside in fantasy. Currently, sportsbooks are projecting out the Giants to be the 4th worst offense in the NFL. Daniel Jones has never produced a top wide receiver in fantasy. Daniel Jones has never produced a top tight end in fantasy. Saquon Barkley couldn't even produce in this situation. So I think Neighbors is a great player. And if we were ranking these guys from a talent perspective, he'd be much higher than this. But the overall offense, I'm afraid, is going to cap his ceiling, even if he should have every single target in this offense from Daniel Jones. Anthony Richardson will be our next guy at 47. With Anthony Richardson, I would take him here if it's a 4-point passing touchdown format where we are chasing rushing upside, rushing upside, rushing upside. We saw Anthony Richardson in a very limited sample last year have all the rushing upside in the world. You have Pittman. They add in A.D. Mitchell to stretch the field. You have Josh Downs going into year 2. You have a healthy Jonathan Taylor, a really good coaching staff. So the situation should be solid for Richardson. If it was a 6-point passing touchdown format, however, I'd probably go CJ Stroud instead because I think Stroud has significantly more passing touchdowns. But in a 4-point passing touchdown league, I'm going to go with the guy who I think has more rushing touchdowns. We're going to go Joe Mixon at 48. Joe Mixon sadly looks like he could be washed. In that 2017 NFL draft class, obviously he's been around for a very long time. The positive news is he was drafted at 20 years old coming out of OU, so he's not as old as some of these other names like Dalvin Cook, Leonard Fournette from that same class. He's going over to what should be a much better offense in 2024 than what he played in 2023. There's not a ton of competition for touches in this backfield. I just don't know how much juice he has left. Kenneth Walker at 49. With Kenneth Walker, if you're playing in a non-PPR format, I think you bump him up. A full PPR league, probably a little less excited, just because obviously Zach Charbonnet right now projects out to be the receiving back in this offense. And then CJ Stroud will be coming in here at 50. I know a lot of people have talked about Stroud having a potentially capped ceiling just because he's not going to run the ball. All I would say is he was a mid-quarterback one in fantasy last year. If you're looking at a points per game perspective, you add in Stephon Diggs, you have Tank Dell going into year 2, and CJ Stroud was a freaking rookie, the best rookie quarterback I've ever seen. I feel very comfortable having him as my QB1 this year if I decide to wait until the 5th round. But I think that's all I have for you. Again, really hope that these rankings are able to help you. Really hope that you are able to go out there and crush your league with them in 2024. Now, of course, I'm going to be updating all my rankings, all my draft guide, all the ADP consensus cheat sheets every Sunday until the start of the year. You will get that email if you signed up to Underdog Fantasy with code FLOCK, made a $10 deposit, did all of which with that account in 2024, and it's going to be sent to the email address that you signed up with. Now, of course, it's not too late if you're not already on. I'm still drafting every single night. We're still having our flock tournaments every Monday and Thursday night till the season starts as well. So if you want to draft with me, if you want to get into practice draft before your main one, you can do so on Underdog Fantasy. Links in the description, links in the comment section. Code FLOCK will hook you up with everything we already talked about, plus a Christian McCaffrey special pick'em, more than less than half a total yard, as well as you're going to get hooked up with a 50% deposit bonus up to $250. I think that's it. Outside of we have our Flock meetup, August 22nd, Austin, Texas, flockfantasy.store if you want to get a ticket. Really looking forward to hanging out with y'all. Should be a ton of fun. I'll be there. A ton of other fantasy football YouTubers will be there as well. But thank you again. Really do appreciate you. Really hope you have a great day and hope we get to see you out with the live stream so I can draft against you later tonight.